Hi, I'm Dan. Thanks for checking in on Dimgaard this week. So last week I published a survey, and I had enough participants in that to give me good information on what are likely to be useful topics for these videos. With that in mind, the topic that was that came up as being considered the most useful, and I can understand this because this is not really something that you see a lot of in the more popular, more highly polished D&D channels, is adapting, modifying prepared material, prepared adventures for your particular session. And so I'm going to deviate a little bit here and explain a big difference between 5th edition and previous editions. And that is going all the way back, like you go all the way back to like Keep on the Borderlands, right? The idea was that you had DMs who didn't have the time to go in and do the research and do the preparation necessary for their 4 to 6 hour weekly game. Sessions were longer back then, and so you would take stuff that other experienced DMs had done, and they would polish it up so that you could pick it up and run it, right? That was the idea, right? Going all the way back to the earliest D&D, when you had prepared adventures, was that, and then it became even more. If you were publishing during 3.5, like there were part of the review process was you would get feedback on, it's like this takes too much preparation on the DM's part. You need to add elements so that a DM can pick this up and be able to run it in 15 minutes of preparation, right? And then 5th edition completely threw that out the window, right? Like going all the way back to Lost Mines of Flandelver, where you've got a lot of these politics interacting with each other, different elements that have agendas of their own that are competing, and in order to really present that material and give the experience that is desired, a DM had to put in a lot of time, right? And couldn't just pick that up and say, here we go, right? I got this new adventure. Give me 10 minutes, get your dice ready, and we're going to be ready to go. You just can't do that in 5th edition. And, well, I guess you can with Dimgaard material, but you can't do that anywhere else, right? Like if you're like, okay, I'm gonna be running Adventure League on Wednesdays they're going to be giving me these Adventure League adventures. You've got to be ready to just understand that for that 4-hour session, you're going to have to put in significant preparation time. That's just the model under which 5th edition has moved. The value added that prepared adventures in 5th edition, the selling point is not that that you're going to have less prep time. That's just not part of the sales pitch for prepared material anymore. So with that in mind, I do want to say, if you're not using, I mean, there may be other third-party series out there that require low preparation besides Dimgaard, but I'm just not aware of. If someone is aware of them, that other series that require very little preparation that a DM can pick up and run in 20 minutes of preparation, it'd be great if you would share that in the comments. I would be very interested in that. But so with that up front, understanding that yes, you are going to have to spend some significant time if you're running one of the WotC published books, or the Adventure League modules that come out that are like 1 session adventures, although they're usually serialized, right? So there will be a series of, or like I've even looked at other third-party adventures, and they also require considerable upfront prep time. It just depends upon who the publisher of that third-party material is. So, and I will say, like, if the goal is so the more time you can put up front, the smoother things are going to go for you, right? The more you're going to be able to make that adventure your own implementation of it, like you're going to be able to put your own personal stamp on that. There are hundreds of people who run any particular Adventure League adventure, and if your goal is to have that be your implementation of that adventure, which is encouraged by Adventure League, then yes, that the more time you can put up front to tailor your NPCs and to flavor to have a real to think about things and say, okay, this is the way I'm going to present this in my own style. That's great. And the other, it goes the other way too, right? If your goal is no, I want this to be really the experience that this is designed to convey, right? Not so much my own interpretation, but I really want to give my players what the creators of that adventure wanted players to get. Then also the more time you can put in preparation, the closer you're going to be able to get to that goal. So whatever your goal is, the more time you can spend, the closer you're going to get to that goal. But regardless of what that is, what your endpoint that you're shooting for is, there's a series of preparation elements that are going to be that you're going to need to go through, and there other experienced DMs may have additional elements, or they may find some of these to be unnecessary. I don't know, but this is my 6 years of considerable presenting prepared material that I've acquired to different groups, bunches of different groups, and this is what I've come up with. So, the first thing that I do and that I suggest you do is get a clear idea of what it is the material is trying to do, right? So and by a clear idea, I mean a very succinct, something that you could convey in a single sentence. This is an adventure, or this is an investigative adventure set in blah blah blah, set in Waterdeep or wherever, right? Loudwater, wherever, or this is a war module, right? A war adventure. We are entering a combat situation, and we have our side and they have their side, and we're trying to win a battle, right? They're battle adventures. It can be a dungeon delve, right? It could be a hex crawl where you're exploring a hex, right? So you need to have the first thing I do is get clear in my mind. Okay, this is the archetype of this adventure. This is the, and there are only like 6 or 7 different archetypes of adventure archetypes that we're talking about here, and they're very well known, right? There's the investigative adventure, there is the escort adventure, there is the item acquisition adventure, there's the hex crawl, there's the combat adventure, right? Like they're well known. So the first thing I do is figure out, okay, that's which of these categories this adventure falls into. Now, sometimes you have hybrids, right? But usually you can categorize it, and how much effort it's going to be completely dependent upon that adventure, right? Like some prepared material, they will tell you, like in the first sentence, this is an investigative adventure set in Waterdeep, or this is this is an exploration of the area around blah blah blah, right? And then oh, it's a hex crawl right off the bat, right? But sometimes you have to like dig through there. You have to like you have to be like 3 or 4 encounters in, and you're like, oh, okay, I see what's going on. They're trying to figure out who the fiend is. They're supposed to figure out who the fiend is who's causing all this trouble, right, or whatever, right? But that's the first thing. So figure out what's the point of the adventure. What is the thing that the players are supposed to come away from that adventure having realized they did, right? That's a very frustrating thing for players whenever they complete 4 hours of play and they're like, yeah, I still don't understand what the point was. I still don't understand what we were doing there, right? So and if the DM doesn't know that, then you can be pretty sure that that the players are never going to know that, right? So the DM needs to know that, and that will provide a framework for everything else. So once you figure that out, the next thing is you need to look at the overall picture and try and figure out what the likely play flow is, right? So you can but sometimes it's presented in the material linearly. It's like, oh, okay, they're going to do this and they're going to do this and they're going to do this and but sometimes it's much more of a web type situation where they're like, okay, they come in here and then they can do one of 4 things, right? And then depending upon what those 4 things do, they can maybe do one of 3 other things and maybe come back together and maybe come back and do one of the 3 remaining. So it can be a much more complicated network than just they're going to do this and this and this. So you don't want to be surprised for that, right? Like you don't want to be 10 minutes into the adventure, you've done the introduction, and then you're like, okay, now what's supposed to happen next, right? That's a very frustrating feeling. It's a very frustrating situation for the players too, and so going before you sit down to present the material, you need to understand what the likely play flow is, what the expected set of options are at each step in that adventure. So once you have that, you probably, and this isn't absolutely necessary, but if you have the time up front, it's a good idea to do, and that is anticipate where your players, like particularly if these are players who you have a history with, think about where your players are going to go off of that track, right? So if you have players who are inclined to go do some, like explore some things that are hinted at but not actually delimited within the adventure, then you're like, well, are my players likely to go off into these undescribed elements? And decide how you're going to handle that. Like it's completely valid to say, I'm sorry, Bill, that's really not within the scope of this adventure, right? Like you're not expected to leave Waterdeep and go to Sisek or wherever in this adventure. And if you're going to want to do that, we can, but we're going to have to end this one and reschedule and take that up next week because I'm just not prepared for that. That's a completely valid response for the DM whenever players head off into Here There Be Dragons territory, right? But within the scope of the adventure, the next step, the next layer is to break up that content into the expected encounters, right? So they're like, and you can see that it's like, oh, they're going to go to this location and experience these people, these NPCs or monsters, and just have a real good feeling for the locations and the creatures and the elements of those locations that are going to be encountered, right? and then your preparation becomes sort of a peace movement type thing, right? So you now you've got these contained elements, these encounters that you're going to be moving around, and you will have prepared each of those elements separately, right? You're going to know how they interact with each other, but they are still atomic elements. They're like the pieces of your session that you are moving around as necessary to flow through your session. And then within those elements, within those encounters, you're going to have two general types, right? So there's going to be combat and there's going to be not combat. And not combat is usually going to be a role play situation, right? Where they are engaged in negotiations or investigations or character building of some kind or world building of some kind, like getting lore. But those are the two general elements. It's going to be combat or not combat. Now, sometimes things can get, like particularly in Dimgaard, what we like to do is we like to, coming into an encounter, we like to set it up to where it's a little like it's a case of mistaking identity, and it looks like it's going to be an encounter, but or a combat encounter, but if players are on the ball, they can say, oh wait, you made a mistake here, we've made a mistake, and combat is not going to occur, right? And instead we're going to move into a non-violent resolution. But that's kind of unusual. Like usually in most prepared material, it's pretty clear whether it's combat or not combat. So so here's the thing with combat, right? So people like combat, like players and DMs like combat. And we get that. Like everybody who plays D&D gets that. That's not a, like at its core, right? D&D is a combat focused game, right? More than 70% of the limited rules are applicable only to combat, right? Things like actions in a turn and turns and spells. Most spells are really only relevant in combat. But in 5th edition, so 5th edition recommends that most combat encounters be medium or hard encounters, right? And a lot of prepared material follows that recommendation. Like if you look at almost all prepared material, including the WotC published material, you look at the experience point budget that they're using to populate the combat encounter with opponents for the PCs, those work out to be medium or hard encounters. That's just very, and eventually the same way, on and on. However, the reason that those are defined as medium and hard encounters is because the PCs are expected to face 6 to 8 of those without a long rest. Those are not decoupled, right? A medium to hard encounter is only a medium to hard encounter if the PCs are facing 6 to 8 of those without a long rest. If PCs are able to complete a long rest after 2 medium or hard, those are never going to be medium to hard encounters. There's never going to be the suspense and the threat generated from those encounters. That's just the way PCs are balanced against the CRs of the monsters in 5th edition. And what I see everywhere, like I almost without exception, is that the prepared material says, okay, we're going to present these medium to hard encounters, and then after 2 or 3 of them, they're going to have a long rest. Okay, in this case, those combat encounters are just dice rolling exercise, right? They provide no suspense, they provide no tension, and while players may come in as new players thinking, oh no, this is a really hard encounter. We're facing these blah blah blahs, and we're this level. Experienced players realize, right? Like if you've played 10-hour, or if you played 10 modules of Adventure League, you know, oh yeah, we're going to get a shorter or long, we're going to get a long rest after 3 encounters, and so you change your play accordingly, and it, just like I say, it just becomes an exercise in dice rolling, right? Like because there's never an instance where PCs are really in serious threat, because they don't ever lack resources. So this is what I'm saying, that what I'm getting to is you need to make a decision regarding the combat encounters in prepared material, right? You need to decide, yeah, I'm okay with that, right? Like I'm okay with the idea that combat is never really going to be suspenseful or threatening to the PCs. That the way this prepared material is, the way the long rests are structured, that PCs are just going to be able to blow through those combat encounters. Or you've got to decide, no, I'm not okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, then you need to modify the combat, right? So you can restructure the adventuring day, right? Like, and I've done that before, like with Adventure League modules. I'm like, oh, okay, this adventure incorporates 5 combat encounters, but they're scattered over 3 days. So I'm going to condense everything down into a single day, so that I'm coming close to the expectation of the adventuring day, and these combats will eventually be threatening to the PCs. Or you can say, okay, I'm going to, instead of presenting 3 medium to hard encounters the way this prepared material is, I'm going to increase that a little bit, make it 3 deadly encounters, like not overly deadly encounters, but deadly encounters. But if you do that, the nature of deadly encounters is they can be deadly. Like you can end up with dead PCs whenever you go that route. And you kind of need to, whenever you're modifying that, you need to have some built-in mechanics to cut the encounter when you're reaching the point where you're like, oh, I made this too deadly. And I mean, the easiest way to do that is like on the fly adjusting the enemy's hit points, right? So that just by coincidence, they end up being defeated right when the next attack by them would have killed a PC, right? Another thing to do is you can say, okay, this is likely going to result in having PCs unconscious, but these guys don't want to kill PCs. Their agenda is such that they want the PCs alive so that they can negotiate with them or whatever, right? Use them as hostages, whatever. But if your approach is okay, I realize that these 3 medium to hard encounters in it, and then a long rest is not going to, I want a higher threat level, and I don't want to adjust the adventuring day. I don't want to in some way then all right. So but if you're not going to do that, right? If you're like, no, I'm okay with the fact that the PCs are never going to be threatened with that, then you've got to decide if it's worth the time to go through the dice rolling exercise, right? Like a lot of times, I decide that it's not, and I will say, okay, you meet these guys, you fight them, and we will narrate that fight. Like, I will say, yeah, they do this and this, and you do this and this, and without ever going into initiative and then move on past that, because to the interesting parts of the story, right? Because I don't find just the dice rolling exercise of combat to be interesting, right? But and if I'm in a but sometimes players do, and if I'm with players who like, no, I like that feeling of being in combat. I like the fact that my characters feel so powerful and so in combat. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can actually enter initiative um and but so you've got to decide where you want to be on that issue, because that's definitely something that you're going to experience when it comes to prepared material. The combats are almost certainly as structured within the prepared material, not going to be a threat to the PCs. Or and this happens every now and then. The preparer will say, okay, I understand that within the constraints of my editor, I can only have 3 combat encounters in the course of this 4-hour session. So I want these to be really hard. I want this to be, so I'm going to make deadly encounters. And then you need to, as part of your preparation, you need to recognize that and be ready to deal with that in a way that's going to achieve what you want within the adventure. And by achieve what you want, I mean the fact is there still exist DMs out there. I run into them very often, particularly at conventions, who they like they feel that the thrill of being a DM is whenever they're able to present a prepared adventure and it results in the death of PCs. I disagree with that, and I think it's unfortunate that in 5th edition that idea still exists among experienced DMs. But there's a lot of DMs who started in 3.5 and 4th edition, where DM with prepared material trying to kill the PCs, and the players with their PCs saying, okay, you can't kill me. That was a very valid model for D&D play, and that has carried over into some, particularly at conventions that I've seen. So anyway, moving on. Then the non-combat, the thing that you need to prepare is you need to understand what is the takeaway from that encounter. Like what is the experience and the information that the players are supposed to have for their characters coming out of that. Is it supposed to be that they understand that this is a quirky NPC because this NPC is going to be presented throughout subsequent elements in the adventure, like that happens, or is it supposed to be like an element of the world building or the adventuring, like if it's an investigative module, that could be like there's a particular clue that they're supposed to come away from this non-combat encounter with to get to the final thing, and you need to know that before you sit down at the table, right? Because at the table, under the constant pressure of interacting with players, right? They're a constant demand on your attention. You likely will not have the opportunity to really do, and if it's not just very overt, if it's not like right there in the first line of the encounter, the players are supposed to get this clue, right? If you've got to dig for that, you're probably not going to have that opportunity during presenting the adventure. So you need to identify those elements out there that you need to. And then finally, man, this has turned out to be a lot longer than I expected. finally, as part of your preparation, you need to have a firm grasp of, like, at the end of the session, this is where the PCs are supposed to end up, right? Um, and and the reason you need to have that as part of preparation is because, you know, when you're getting late into the session and you're like, ooh, we're nowhere near where they need to end up, you're going to have to make adjustments on the fly to get them there, right? This is less important if this is a group of players who are going to be consistently meeting with you on a regular basis. But if you're like in a game shop where you're presenting an extended adventure, something, you know, like Storm King's Thunder, and you're saying, I'm gonna run this adventure over the course of many weeks. Well, in that environment, you're going to have players coming and going each week, right? Same thing with Adventure League, right? Although Adventure League, you have atomic sessions, but you need to know this is where they need to be at the end of this session. And if you are 3 hours into a 4-hour session and you're looking at it and say, oh wait, we're only about a third of the way to getting where I need them to be, then you're going to have to restructure things, right? Like, you're going to have to probably summarize a lot of the things that you had intended to expand on as full-fledged encounters, to get them to that point. And part of that is knowing what that point is before you sit down at the table. Okay, so that's my process for preparing adventures. If there are people out there who have different elements in their process for modifying and adapting prepared material that they are presenting to their group, I would love to see that. I would love to see that in the comments here, or, you know, contact me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Discord, even Reddit at times. So I'm pretty easy to identify. Or if you think if you think that I am wrong about something about this, right? Like if you think that, oh no, it's completely okay. You absolutely can challenge PCs with 2 medium encounters and the long rest, right? You're like, if you think, man, you're just full of it on that. I would be interested to hear your reasoning behind that, right? Or whatever it is you think I'm wrong about, right? Like I've said before, one of my most enjoyable experiences is whenever I am wrong about something and people have demonstrated that to me and I'm able to correct that, right? So if I'm wrong about something here and you're sure that I'm wrong about it, and I really do hope that you will jump in there and show me, right? And then, you know, if you find this useful or any of these useful, it'd be really great if you hit the like button, so that helps other people to find it. Subscribing to the channel, I come out with these every week. With that, I again thank you for checking in on Dimgaard this week, and I will see you next week.